Can you put, I shaved off whatever hair I had, so I'd look more very good. More threatening for a security conference. So there's a special place in hell for people who read slides to literate audiences, so I'm going to try not to do that. That's some of my current gigs, indicating somebody who can't keep a job, I guess. They wanted, my publisher, wanted me to bring books of my, copies of my new book, but I'm lazy, so I just brought a picture of it. That's Cornell University Press. So workarounds, we all know, are dangerous, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're exactly what we should be doing. And if we stopped workarounds, the entire nation would be dead in its feet, or whatever the metaphor is, within minutes. Certainly, nobody would make it into or out of a hospital without workarounds. That's what I see. This is starting an aeronautic thing. This is an F4, and the canopy, which when you're finished flying, you put it back. Unfortunately, all the water that's condensed on it, all the rain and everything from the atmospheric change falls along the rails of the canopy and falls directly on the radio. And you know, this is a couple $1 million plane, and the radio probably costs more than $1.40. And it turns out that one of these things without a radio is a very expensive paperweight. So they went through a few thousand radios and they said, we got to do something about this. So the workaround was every pilot was issued a little square of horsehide, I kid you not, and they were to put it over the radio before they moved back the canopy upon landing. It's a workaround. It's not particularly, well, I guess it's software in the sense of, but this is how we live all the time. Now, this is a different sort of workaround. This is a more modern plane, which is run in part by a lot of software. And some of that software was buggy. So they tried to fix the software, and they could not. What they did, and this is not a joke, they modified the plane. They took a I don't know, $500,000 plane, and that's wrong, it's a $16 million plane, forgive me. Okay, keeping the aeronautic reference. I was researching young doctors, and they kept on talking about stealth dosing. And I said, what the hell is stealth dosing? Well, some antibiotics cost about $1, some cost about 20 cents, some cost, and I kid you not, over $2,000. The really expensive ones should only be used, of course, in extremis, and also, if we overuse them, we culture smarter and smarter germs, and we lose our ability to treat disease. So when you order about 90% of drugs, you're supposed to go through the antimicrobial monitoring unit, a bunch of infectious disease docs, and get permission. Well, the bug beeper, I love that term, the bug beeper goes quiet at 10 p.m. So the question was, could we look at orders for these fancy, expensive, dangerous antibiotics at 10:05 p.m.? And in fact, we did. You can see the little graph, and there, shoot up right there. Notice the clock I got, that was a lot of work. In fact, people were practicing stealth dosing to a large extent. Okay, how did that go? Okay, the automatic logout, when you've been on the computer for a while and then you step away, or, you know, there are two ways of handling that. It's too frequent, too soon, and too long. Those are the only options for the automatic logout. So at Dartmouth, they developed a proximity indicator, indicated by that aerial, which has no relationship to. So that's a styrofoam cup. That's an upside-down styrofoam cup. And this is how, I kid you not, 100% of the computers at Dartmouth look. They have invalidated the proximity indicator because, you'd go ask the patient, then they'd say it hurts here, and you'd look, you'd come back, you'd have to log in again. As I said, never works. That's a Rorschach test, and that's HIPAA. And if you know anything about HIPAA, I don't have to say another word. It's whatever the clerk behind the doctor's office thinks it is. And so it is the ultimate workaround producer. And speaking of workarounds, passer. So the program Linked, or however that's pronounced, was hacked, and somebody published all of their passwords. That was the most common. In order. This front page of the Times, I'm not making this junk up. Passwords. So how many passwords do they need? That's some indication. I try to count. At any time, you have to walk around with a whole bunch, and they change frequently, all too frequently. And of course, more than 2 passwords and more than frequent password changes means what? You have to write them down, thus vitiating the whole concept of it. Anybody know the answer to that? Bingo. I tried to spin the answer upside down to confuse you, but I failed. This speaks for itself. I could not make this stuff up. Now, you go into the hospital supply room, and there is this entire forest of passwords up there. I took a picture, and then I realized I'd go to jail if I showed that, so I made this up. Okay, that was the hospital supply room. Now, in contrast, the hospital med prep room looks very different. So what Eric was discussing earlier, Sean Smith, Professor Sean Smith, a security expert at Dartmouth, visited me in my office at Penn, and it was the beginning of the semester, and of course I had been away for the summer, being an academic, working, and seriously, I love Eric presents my work. I have like a 52-page CV. What does he talk about? Buying a beer, wine. Okay, so I looked in my drawer to see where I knew I had written my password, and I did not find it, but I did find the passwords of the previous 75 occupants of my office. This is a real-life picture. By the way, just as an indication, all of those keys in there, they don't fit anything that I know about. So, that's... And the lock doesn't have a key. I just want to be clear. Okay, this is called a Pyxis Machine. It's really a drug ATM. And the nurse or doctor goes up to it. They enter their name, the password, hear that? And then the patient's name, and one of the drawers comes out, and they take the drugs just for that patient. Okay, these yellow stickies are phony. That's not what they do. But because there's a line for the machine or something like that, what they do, which is far more dangerous, is they take the drugs for several patients, and they carefully keep Mrs. Jones's drugs here and Mr. Smith's drugs here, and I'm not going to finish that sentence. We'll return to it. Okay. We're very creative in healthcare, and we have an infinite way of ending the screen. The problem is that each one of those things may or may not imply very different things. So one of them, you lose all the information you've put in. Another, it's saved and then quit. Another, it's submitted. Do you have any idea which one means which? And we're talking life and death. No. So somebody has worked out a workaround for this. And, we're talking about not ordering oxygen for somebody. I mean, this is not, cute. How do we enforce these workarounds? Well, it depends who you know and what you did, and I would argue on a more serious plane that if you were to enforce workarounds, everybody in the hospital would be dead within, a short amount of time. Workarounds is how we keep people alive, so let's not do it. That's a menu. That's a stomach. How do they relate? Unlike many people, I can't go in or out of my doctor's office without spending about 3 hours with him bitching about the software. He said to me, Ross, the woman before you had stomach cancer. I'm certain she had stomach cancer. I went to refer her to the gastroenterologist. There was a drop-down menu of like 40 cancers, of which I remembered 7 from medical school, 3 I read more recently. There was no place on that menu to say, damn it, I'm sure it's stomach cancer. If I knew which kind, I wouldn't be referring her to you, I'd be treating her. So he had to do something that he recognized was a lethal workaround. He had to take his best guess. And drop-down menus that don't have that option always create those workarounds which come back and bite us in the whatever. Okay, blood pressure. There are 3 standard ways of recording blood pressure, the first 3. That's systolic over diastolic. Same row, same column, 1 cell with a slash. After that, it becomes Disney World. Diastolic is never put on top and is always shown under the systolic together. But some computer engineer, basing it on the English alphabet D, put diastolic followed by 2 screens of lab reports or whatever else with systolic. This is how you not treat a patient. After that come all kinds of things that we found in the little box where you would be looking for a number, or preferably 2 numbers. In other words, this psychotic series of entries, all of which make sense in a separate cell, were what we found. It went on. So our previous speaker, the president of the healthcare system, spoke about the lack of standards within medicine. This is typical of that. This is typical. This is what happens when vendors control the process and don't allow rules, and when each provider comes up with a clever idea. By the way, I showed this to a colleague who said, it's missing my favorite one. I said, what's that? She said, stable. I don't know, stable high, stable low, stable whatever. But this is about a range check. We all believe in range checks. You should not put in something too bizarre. So the patient is dying in front of the triage nurse in the ER, which is, by the way, called ED in medical emergency department. And the doctor goes to put in the blood pressure, which is bizarrely low because the patient is dying in front of the triage nurse. And the computer says, nobody has a blood pressure that low. It's not allowed to be entered. And the doctor says, actually, in front of the triage nurse dying in the ED is exactly when they'd have the blood pressure that low. So, of course, he puts in a normal, healthy blood pressure. And then, first of all, that gets reproduced innumerable times. And then the other question is, what the hell is this guy doing in the ED if he's got such a healthy blood pressure? More workarounds. Infusion pump, smart pump is what they're called. And in the old days, they'd have the drip bag, but that doesn't exist anymore. You program a computer, a little thing like that, with the name of the drug, and there's a library in there, and it knows the possible drip rates for the drug, and sometimes the weight of the patient, because very often you want to do that. Unfortunately, the upper limit on that little device, which, by the way, costs about $17,000. We bought one on eBay to rework it. And it goes up to 350 pounds. But in America, due to the brilliance of our system, we have a lot of people who weigh a heck of a lot more than 350 pounds. Bariatric surgery, the whole bit is a major growth industry. Sorry. And I didn't prep that, I swear. I would have killed it. In any event, you have two workarounds for somebody that large. Both of them are pathologically lethal. One, you can fool the smart pump by telling the pump it's a different drug with a higher drip rate, a higher infusion rate. Or, equally lethal, maybe more, you can hook up two pumps to the patient and sort of divide the weight accordingly. No comment. Okay, this is hard to read. This is what the doctor was confronted with, a drop-down menu, moving the patient 15 feet from the ER to the X-ray. And the options are, you can read, helicopter. There's another one she sent me that I didn't include, which is treating an 83-year-old male, and one of the options that she had to scroll through was fetal monitor. And her comment was, doesn't anybody parse this goddamn list? This is a woman who never curses, but you're going in a hurry. More about lists. I should have found a better graphic for lists, but I got lazy. So ICD-9 and 10 are the International Classification of Diseases. 9 had, 10,000. 10 has 30,000, something like that. I'm looking at Eric. He's going, about right. 200,000, okay. Well, yeah, my usual understatement. In any event, one of them famously is burned while water skiing. So one of the classifications. So the issue here is not the granularity, but does the clinician feel empowered to move down to something that makes sense, or are they just going to put, something like all red or whatever? And so when we get too granular, we run into the problem. Too coarse, well, that's too well, not well is probably true of most of the people in a tertiary care hospital. This one gladdens the heart of experienced physicians because, no, I'm dead serious, because it means that the intern doesn't know what it is, but is signaling them that somebody who has not been a doctor for 2 weeks should take a look at the EKG. This is where you have no options. So in my hospital, unnamed, there's no option for infection for ordering an X-ray, a chest X-ray, which is a common reason. So they make up stuff. Here, cough and pneumonia are put together. So a guy's got a cough. It could be a cold, it could be, but what do you put in? Another circumvention. In the old terrible days of EDs, of emergency room, the residents would treat the patients, and then the attending physician, the senior doc, would go through the reports and sign off each one of those. Well, now, with the magic of digital manipulation, the doctor, the senior doctor, can press one button and basically sign off and approve every single case that day without having to bother to look at them. Now, was there, haphazard work beforehand? Of course, but think about that efficiency. Getting into RFID chips, one of my favorite. So we're thinking of putting them on all the devices and on patients, and of course on all of the sponges so that we don't leave them in the patient's thoracic cavity or something. And I've been doing surveys on this, and what they told me, what a couple places told me is, we've stopped using them. And I said, why? He said, Because we're measuring the stuff in the operating theater next door. In other words, the sensors are picking up the other things. So, yes, madam, your prostate infection is now totally taken care of, according to the, you know. Okay, so why a picture of a pig and a nurse? It's not what you think. Some very clever people realized that they could titrate, adjust the amount of food every pig would get by giving them a collar with an RFID chip. So when that pig showed up at the feeding trough, the amount of carbohydrates and fats and stuff determined by the veterinarian would be released, and the pig would eat what's good for the pig. Why do I mention this? Well, within a few days, a lot of collars came off. And pigs are very smart. So they would grab this ectopic, this free-floating collar in their snouts, and they'd carry it over to the feeding trough, and they'd get their food and the food of the other pig. They'd outsmart the pig collar workaround. So here's what some hospital people are thinking of doing: giving every nurse an RFID chip and putting sensors next to the sink when the nurse goes into the room to ensure that she washes her hands. Do you think nurses are as smart as pigs? I mean, I can think up, and I have no training in nursing, a couple of workarounds to that, as in swinging by the sink on the way in. You know, what kind of silliness is that? Now I want to talk about a paper that specifically looked at just workarounds. And it deals with barcoding, and that's where every patient has a barcode on their wrist, and every medication has a barcode, make that English, attached to it. So these are some of the things we did. We shadowed nurses. We did, I don't want to go through them. We did a whole bunch of things. We attended all of these meetings, tried not to look too conspicuous. And what we found, and I will describe the images. Now, I so like reading this. What we found on the meds themselves was crinkled, smudged, torn, missing, and my all-time favorite. The pharmacy covered the barcode with a decal reminding the nurse to scan it. You could not make this up. And we'll talk about malfunctioning scanners. Now, why the patient's wristbands? I know this comes as a shock to you, but patients in hospitals are sick and, let's say we're doing lunch, messy is the word. So very often the barcodes are unreadable. Also, the elderly pull them off, children chew them off, neonates suck them out, it's not in here. Some patients are in isolation, and drug addicts rip them off and say, "Excuse me, I haven't received my pain meds today." No MRI, no, wrong. No scanner, which is attached to a little computer, works near the MRI machine. No scanner can be carried into a patient's room unless it's covered in plastic, which makes it impossible to read. When the scanner doesn't work, you don't know if it's the battery in the scanner, the battery in the computer, wrong patient, wrong drug, or wrong part of the hospital, or you're too close to the x-ray room. Doctor prescribes 20 milligrams, pharmacy sends up 2 10-milligram tablets. The nurse scans the first 10-milligram tablet, says no good. She says, aha, smart little scanner. Scans the second 10-milligram tablet. Unfortunately, it's not that smart. And of course, she starts screaming into the scanner head, 10 plus 10 equals 20. The scanner head is not impressed. You have a window in which time you can scan the patient's ID badge and the meds, about a minute, 2 minutes. Back to our timeout thing. Well, about 20% of meds are refrigerated. So you could wheel the 93-year-old woman down 2 flights of stairs and across the hallway to the fridge. You could cut off her arm with the barcode attached, or you make an extra copy of the barcode. While you do that, you make an extra copy of the 4 other patients who have refrigerated meds. You carefully segregate. We're back to the pockets. I'm not going to. A computer on wheels in a hospital is called a cow, computer on wheels. A cow that does not fit into the room because both grandmothers are visiting or there's an extra smart pump there or some other reason, is left in the hallway grazing happily, and it is called by the nurses a fat cow. That didn't make it into the paper, but I did slide it into one of the tables. So you take the handheld scanner, tethered or wired to wireless, and you scan the patient's barcode. You scan the 10, 15 meds. That's not an exaggeration. You give them. You go out to the hallway where the cow has been happily grazing, and where you could not hear or see the alerts on the computer screen, and you find out that you've just administered 12 meds to the wrong patient. We have found barcodes in so many interesting places. You've got 14 patients, you've got 14 wristbands all over. We found them all of these places. One WAG suggested that I could improve patient safety dramatically by outlawing Scotch tape into a hospital. And I could go on. There's all kinds of things. Sometimes the barcode is on the outside wrapper of the med. You throw it into the red bag. Raise your hand if you want to go into the red bag and get it. Sometimes you turn off the alarm because the patient's been in agony and finally fallen asleep, and so of course you can't hear the alarm. It goes on. You can read the paper. Security and financial settings. So there was a concern that people were making all kinds of cash deposits to banks, and they were worried what kind of creeps were these. So they said that after 10 deposits a day, you had to get approval from a platform officer in the bank. Well, it turns out there are thousands of traveling salesmen and people like that who collect cash who want to deposit it in a bank. Sounds like a wise thing. And they very quickly overwhelmed the bank staff because they were constantly coming up for permission. Well, managers move around, they quit, they die, but the card stays. So what happened is all of these deposits were approved by the card of a dead guy. So rather than have the oversight that they wanted, they had basically tens of thousands of deposits daily approved by dead people. Last slide. Why do we have this? That's a famous quote from a Princeton computer scientist. 99% of workarounds are our fault, meaning we designers, people who worry about security and all of that. It's our fault. We are responsible. We don't watch people in medicine, we'd say in situ. In the rest of the world, we'd say what they're actually the hell doing with the computer system. We don't look, and we don't look carefully, and we don't look like people who know how to look and know how to ask questions. One of the advantages I have in medicine is that my PhD is in sociology. And so people open up to me because I'm not going to say, you did what to that patient? Although I'm really thinking you did. Anyway, I'm actually also a professor of medicine, but that's a joke, a workaround, actually. It's true, it was done for HIPAA reasons. It's true. Okay, so I watched people do things at the computer, and they would do these really stupid, crazy things, and I'd say, where'd you come up with that workaround? And they'd say, oh, this was taught to me by my senior resident, or by the head nurse, or by... So if you ask them what workarounds are you doing, the answer is none. We don't see the workarounds that we're doing. They become part of our lives, and without them, of course, we'd be sitting at, this is a workaround. I was supposed to give my program up there, and I fiddled with it. You cannot trust people's reports of what they're doing. I start my computer obsessively too early in the morning. How many clicks does it take me to see my email? I have no idea. 10, 5, 17? I have no idea. I am a lousy reporter of my own actions, as my wife will affirm. And everything is moving in a constant thing. Hospitals have between 105 or 600 different IT systems, depending on how you count it. All of them are moving and changing and getting upgrades and patches and stuff like that. It's all happening simultaneously, and anything that happens anywhere is going to come down and affect the particular system you want. And as one of my graduate students said, actually, it's not, pick 400 intersections. Each of those other things are intersecting with themselves. So the matrix would be bigger than this room. And the only solution is to constantly be looking, have people who know how to ask questions, have people who are understanding what's going on, doing that with on-the-floor observations, and of course, statistical analysis and audits of the programs themselves. And that's how you find these things. And each one is not a cause to fire somebody. Each one is a cause to examine the causes of those workarounds and see how to fix them. Thank you. I know what I was going to say. I'm really here for people to ask questions and watch me fumble. There are microphones throughout. Oh, come on. Somebody's got to have a question. Yeah. Positive workarounds is where people come up with clever ways of doing something that sometimes is so clever that instead of punishing the guy, they actually make that part of the protocol. So people will, the good doctor this morning spoke of one with the blood thing, but with software, we put tabs in so that the doctors wouldn't have to leave one system, log out, and then log into another system to see some other information. But rather, with the tabs, they could have them both, right? Made sense. Easy. Another parallel workaround to that, and I kid you not, is I have walked in and I have seen computer screens not in operating rooms, but in hospital wards, duct taped together so that the doctors could see the information that they needed to see about one patient at one time. I mean, part of the problem with healthcare IT is that it's state-of-the-art interfaces circa 1992 or something. And so you are always doing things like finding one piece of information, writing it down on your scrubs, scrolling down, clicking over, another 7 clicks, another 2 minutes of scrolling to find the other piece of information that should be contiguous. And so the workaround is writing it on yellow stickies or your hand or the patient's forehead, whatever. But no, the point is, it's stupid. Somebody should demand that these systems, that the vendors be responsive to the needs of clinical people who are usually in a hurry and don't have time for this nonsense. Anyway, that's a positive workaround where we set up tabs so that you could. There's another one, by the way, which is now that every doctor has a smartphone, they used to have to log out of one system, then log out of another, and then click into one of these. Basically, it's a cell phone-driven PDR, physician desk reference. And now they can leave the system open, pull up their smartphone, and compare the two. Yeah, you got to scream or. All right, I'll scream. Good. By write a script, you mean write something for the computer. Yeah, if you can do that and you can do it well, it's wonderful. The problem is that most of the large electronic health systems in hospitals are made by one of 7 vendors who actually don't allow you to screw around with the system. There are restrictions, and you can't do it. In addition, you've probably built in a tremendous amount of customization and the like that has made patches and upgrades, near impossible. So a colleague of mine who runs the Geisinger Clinic said that every upgrade costs him 40,000 man-hours to work on just to bring it up to snuff. These things are infinitely complex, and with this audience I can get technical. They are built on miles and miles and miles of spaghetti code, and they are often kludged together from 50 to 70 different software programs that the vendor has purchased. So GE has bought, all kinds of things, and they're bursting at the seams. The whatever you want to call them, are badly held together. So you say to them, could I please have this in the program? And they say, yes, but you won't be able to order Band-Aids for 4 months. I'm not making that up. There are enough people in this audience. If I'm making that up, scream. The systems are so behemoth, both in age and size, that we're dealing with very clunky. Now, in the ambulatory space, every doctor who has a brother-in-law who knew Excel or VisiCalc and had a garage has built an ambulatory EHR. There are literally about 800 of them. They don't talk to each other. A lot of these systems are like isolated fax machines without phones. We've created a Tower of Babel of medical informatics where it's just pathetic. I mean, my anger is that I watch patients die, and we really don't like to see that. We'd like information. And speak of an example, so this one guy moved to a new area, had a heart problem, repeated thing, not that severe, but severe enough. He ended up in the emergency department 17 times in a year and a half. Each time, the computer alert system said, ooh, this guy is ideal for pneumonia vaccine. Son of a bitch got 17 pneumonia vaccine. It's not dangerous. He's okay. It's a little bit wasteful, but and he looks like a pincushion. But because it was an alert without a memory, because we have so many different systems running that we don't keep track. There was a hand right in front of. I saw a hand. Yeah, I'll take. Scream or find a mic. Does the medical profession have enough clout on the vendors? No. These systems for a large hospital system cost about $200 million. Implementing it costs another 3 to 5 times that. So we're talking about $1 billion for a large hospital system. That's, with care and ambulatory and labs and stuff like that. That's $1 billion investment. Now, if I buy the wrong toaster, I throw it out. If I spend $1 billion, I am married to the mob. And very few, CIOs want to go in front of the board of directors or the local paper and say, you know how you bought the wrong toaster? Well, also, they take 4 or 5 years to implement, right? Now, you can ask the people of Anaheim not to get into car accidents, pregnant, or sick for the next 5 years, but they probably won't obey you. So you are implementing this thing while you're moving ahead with a 24/7 organization that's dealing with chaos all the time. These factory models of hospitals really irritate me because they say, well, if we can run a hospital. In a factory, you buy the equipment, you bring it on board, you put it together. In a hospital, everybody is broken, and you have tons of unknown information, and everybody has a homeostatic mechanism that's working all the time. Plus, you're doing things to them, and you're not sure. So that metaphor that, why can't we run a hospital like a factory, and why can't software be easy like that? It's an invalid metaphor. I see it's time. I thank you very much. I'll be around for the next day and a half. Feel free to find me.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
Thank you for coming and speaking, Ralph. So I want to thank Professor Koppel one more time for coming and speaking to us. My takeaway was we obsess about our users who write down passwords on sticky notes and we want to fire them, when in fact we should be asking them why they did that and how we can fix it so they won't do it.